Hello everyone and welcome to a One Control Port pickup video. I'm Benjamin Yoder, here today to talk to you about some of the games I've picked up over the last few months. Also show you some gameplay. I try to play each of these titles about an hour just so I have something to say about each of them. And just give you a quick idea of what these games are and hopefully they are of interest to you. One thing I'll try to do that I did a pretty bad job of last time was making sure the games are in frame. Last time I kept like wavering them outside of the frame itself, so I'll try to do my best to make sure you guys get a full look at the case the entire time, or at least all the time I'm not showing any kind of gameplay. So if you've been on the website for a while or followed the YouTube channel for a while, chances are you know I like to import video games, and I will always recommend Japan Retro Direct. They're who I use to import most of my video games unless there's something that I for some reason can't get through them, or it just makes more sense to purchase through another outlet. So I've got 4 games here, all for the PlayStation. Well, so one to the PlayStation 1 and the rest are for the PlayStation 2. The first one being Deep Freeze. And Deep Freeze is kind of a strange game. It is, I guess you could call it like a top-down, almost tactical shooter, except for it's not really a game that I'm having a little trouble opening this one up. It's not really a game that you like aim and shoot or anything like that. It's very like top-down isometric like, and so you have these 2 characters that run through the environment. They're shooting people. You have different like weapons and abilities you can use, or mainly just different like sub weapons. So you can throw grenades. There's like a heal one too. I think there's like a stun grenade as well. And it has all English voice acting, like super cheesy English voice acting, which is always really appealing to me. So you can kind of follow the story. It's a silly plot about, you know, a terrorist. Well, I don't know about silly, but it's a plot about these terrorists who are basically trying to, I forget if it's kidnap or kill the vice president. But it has really over the top characters, and you can kind of look at them a little bit here in the manual. So I think the best thing you can do with this game is just kind of watch the opening video and you'll know what the tone of this thing is. It's just the most 90s cheesy voice acting. And it's just I don't know, it's very of the era. If you like that Resident Evil style, like very stiff voice acting, I think you'll really enjoy Deep Freeze. But as a game, it's pretty fun to play. It's a little clunky at times. It can be hard to like do these dodge rolls, which are pretty important to the gameplay itself, that you're able to kind of roll out of enemies shooting. But you and your partner kind of go through these different environments. They're all pre-rendered environments, so the camera angle is fixed, which causes some problems where enemies are like right off screen, but they don't seem to attack you unless you're able to also shoot them as well. So the game's generous in that regards, at the very least. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this one so far. I really think this is something that I'll sit down and play through, as long as there's no real like Japanese hurdles. But at least when it comes to the story, outside of like, you know, the information files that you can find on your PDA or whatever you have in the game, it's all voice acted in English and perfectly cheesy and understandable English, but it's a good time, and I would recommend at the very least looking at the opening video for this game. It's quite the treat, honestly. So another game on this list, or that I picked up from Japan Retro Direct, and I can't for the life of me remember the full name of this game. It might be like Maho, it's like Maho something Kurohime, which is, I think, like Magical Girl Black Princess or something. I don't know. That's probably wrong. I know Kurohime would be like Black Princess, I guess you could say. But it's you know, a very, as you can maybe tell by her having like this super tight bodysuit, a very like fan servicey kind of game. It's actually based off an anime. I don't know if I want to say a fan servicey kind of game, but you know, she is in tights, and they do a plenty of like sexual poses on like the loading screens and things like that. And I had a little trouble getting into this one. If you're familiar with the gun gauge video I did, it feels somewhat similar to that, where it's kind of this like third person shooter, but there's no real aiming, so you just kind of have like this auto lock on. but there's no real visual indicator of what you're aiming at in this game, so it's a little challenging in that regard in terms of figuring out what you're shooting. And usually, like, when you're locking on and then like unlocking so you can do like a manual movement around the environment, it doesn't particularly feel responsive. It's just, everything in this game feels very floaty, down to the character movement, the shooting, you know, how you have to lead bullets in the game. These types of games where you're not really aiming, a lot of it comes down to the movement and being able to, you know, read the enemy's movements and kind of lead them on a shot, so you end up, you know, hitting them even though you're not actually aiming anywhere. This game definitely, it's functional, but I would not say it's great. It has some flashy special attacks, so you can essentially like cast these, at least all the ones I saw were like flame attacks and things like that. So there's like this bird that will fly out and go around and hit enemies in the field, and there's like this giant serpent that will come on the ground and breathe fire, and you have a lot of MP in this game, so it's actually very easy for you to kind of spam those moves. But it's not, I don't know, it's very clunky and execution overall between the magic and just kind of shooting and the movement. And I can't say it feels great. Even some of the production values, you know, there's like no music during some of the cutscenes, or I think all the cutscenes I saw. So it's just like this quiet, like really eerily quiet dialogue at times. So yeah, I didn't love this game, but I do feel like I might be missing something with it. The reason why is because I tried fighting the second boss, and I had a lot of trouble dealing any real damage to him. I did try fighting him again after I did my hour, you know, time I spent with this game. I tried playing this a little bit on a stream, and we got a little further in the boss fight, but I still was not able to beat him. So yeah, I think there might be something here with this game, but I get the feeling that, you know, being an anime licensed game, it's probably not going to be too exciting beyond of what I've already seen, of just kind of shooting out waves of enemies and then fighting like a boss, and all of it being very clunky and kind of hard to navigate. So I could be wrong about that, but I'm not super excited about this one. Admittedly, when I picked it up, I was pretty certain it was probably going to be pretty chunky, but yeah, we'll see on this one. It's one of those things that it's cheap enough that I just picked it up and it looked kind of interesting. You know, as a fan of Gun Gauge, a game that kind of looks like a Gun Gauge is worth picking up, in my opinion. So this next one, as you might be able to guess, is a Hunex game. You can find that logo right there. There's that Hunex logo. And this is an otome game, but instead of just doing like, you know, some you know, character portraits with text going across, you also get some rhythm game elements as well. Look at this disc. It's like, it almost feels like it's a sun damaged disc or something. I know it's not, but like just the look of it reminds me of what game cases look like when they've been sitting out in the sun too long. But yeah, it's got that low budget. I mean, it's a simple series game, so you know, it's going to be low budget. But it definitely has that low budget like look and feel to it. But I did like the gimmick of there being the rhythm game aspect of this game. It's nothing super fancy. It's really just, you know, pressing some notes as a bar goes across, and there's something kind of weird about there being two bars and you have to like switch between them, and they try to like accommodate for this by like showing you the same note twice if it's appearing on like the first beat of the next bar, so you can kind of time it out. But it is kind of chunky, but I found it to be fun, if only because you know, it was kind of exciting to sit there and be like, when's the next rhythm game? And I like the presentation of the rhythm game aspects. It is pretty cheap, but you know, the characters are animating on screen. There's like occasionally some cut-ins of some like larger images of the characters. Maybe not as much as I would like to in some of these earlier songs, but you know, there's you know, I would imagine there's at least a handful of songs throughout this game. So I'm not sure how much like playing the songs in the game affects how like your relationship develops or anything like that. If you don't know, Hunex kind of is an interesting company because I feel like they spend a lot of time thinking about how your relationship mechanics kind of interact with game mechanics and tying those into each other. Although at least in terms of like, you know, the PCFX era of Hunex, right? During the PlayStation 2 Simple series, I'm not sure if that attention to detail was quite there or not. But it was interesting to see them kind of implement that element to the game. Although it is one of those things where if you fail the song, it seems like they won't let you progress. So at least if you do super bad on the song, it seems like you usually just get a chance to kind of go back and try again to complete it. But I enjoyed it. You know, it's the problem I have with like Glass Rose, or sorry, not Glass Rose, Glass Forest, which I also got, which is also a simple series game from Hunex, where I can sit there and stare at this game for a long time, and I'll probably be entertained by it just for, you know, what I can pull from it, what little I can pull from it, not knowing any Japanese. But the chances are is I would probably rather spend my time with like a with Steam Princess on PC or something like that from Hunex. So it's just not quite the priority, but it was cheap, and it has some like actiony, I don't know, action's the right word, but it has elements of the game that I can actually interact with as a English speaker only. So yeah. And then finally, the last thing in the pickup pile for the Japan Retro Direct is I don't know the full name of this one. It's also a Simple Series 2000 game, but I can read Poi Poi at the very least. So I just call this game Poi Poi. But yeah, it's basically like a 3D Bomberman kind of thing. You can see there's a pretty diverse set of characters. They look very generic, but you have a robot here, and then also like a schoolgirl maid, drunk salaryman, police officer, things like that. So it's a weird mix of, you know, very normal people kind of running around. I like the color of this disc, unlike the Love Beat one. This feels better to me. but yeah, so you basically are in these 3D environments and you're kind of running around. There's a bunch of bombs in the environment, so you can kind of think of it like as Bomberman, but in 3D, but not in the way 3D Bomberman actually is. If you ever played like Bomberman 64, at least, and it's really sluggish is the thing. It takes a long... It's really hard to move around the environment. Each character moves really slowly. You do get faster if you pick up like a power-up, and that's like a temporary power-up. I don't think there's any like particular stats per character, but I could be wrong about that. But anyways, you just kind of go around, you pick up these bombs, and all the bombs have numbers on them, which is basically the timer of which it will take for that bomb to explode. So you can kind of pick them up, and they'll trail behind you. You can hold it in your hands, which will then stop the countdown timer, so you can like cook the bomb, and then you can actually throw it. And at least the mission mode, how this works is you go around and you try to blow up a certain number of type of characters. So there might be like policemen and schoolgirls on the stage, but you only want to blow up the schoolgirls. So you'll run around and throw bombs at the schoolgirls while the policemen are just kind of there and to be in the way kind of thing. So yeah, it's fun and goofy. It's definitely like animation-wise very eccentric in its presentation. But I do feel like it's a little slow. But maybe, you know, if you get good enough where to the point where you're able to like kind of combo people and blowing them up and things like that, maybe you'd get more out of it that way. But you know, I think I'll probably spend a bit more time with this one at some point at the very least. But being it's just like a simple series game with a mission mode, I don't have a ton of confidence there's a ton of more depth than that to this game. I'm gonna guess it probably has multiplayer as well. You know, obviously being on the PlayStation 2, you need a multi-tap if you want to do more than 2 players. Although looking at it, it looks like it might be only 2 players. So don't rush out there and get a multi-tap. It looks like I think that says how many players right there. You might not be able to see it because of the focus, but it says 1 to 2. So yeah, and I think that's it for the imports. But that's not it for things from other people. I mean, I purchased from Japan Retro Direct. It wasn't like a gift or anything like that. But if you've been around the streams before, you might have seen Zero in the streams. And Zero let me know recently that he had some PlayStation 1 games that he didn't want anymore, or he found. I'm not quite sure where they came from. So he was like, here, dude, take these. So there's a few in here. The one I was probably most interested in is this game. The case is a little dirty. I might need to clean it up. but it's Thunder Truck Rally, and I believe I don't know if it's the exact developers, but at least looking at Psygnosis, you'll know that this is the Destruction Derby developers, as they or at least publisher, as they kind of note on the box here, and it does feel very much like Destruction Derby for the PlayStation 1, and the thing I can say about this, and check out this skull, man. Wow. The thing I can say about this game, you can see how dirty that is from that side. Sorry, Zero, I'm not trying to rain on your game with the dirty cases. I've had dirty cases for much of my life in the past. But anyways, so basically this is a racing game, but it has, and like with Destruction Derby, it does have like a health bar as you play through it. So each car has like a certain amount of damage it can take. The hard thing with this game is that every time you jump off like a ramp or something like that, your car takes damage. So these trucks are not really built to even do like some of the smallest little hops. Actually, you take some damage no matter what, which actually is a really annoying thing when you bounce around a little bit after a jump, because then it does even more damage. But you're basically just kind of driving around these environments. It's a PlayStation 1 game, so it's using mainly D-pad support for turning, so it's a bit hard to get some precise movement there. But you're driving around, and I found, at least in the short period of time I played this game, the strategy really seemed to be to stay as close to the ground as possible. When you're going up ramps, slow down, try to just kind of, roll over them, which does not seem like what you'd want to do in a game like this. And obviously, if you manage your HP fine and drive well, you can do most of the jumps in the race without breaking down. But it is a heavy risk, and when you get to that final lap with barely any health left, you kind of wish that you took things a little easier ahead of time. There's also like a mode in here, I think it's called like elimination mode or something, where you kind of drive around these somewhat open world environments, and there's flags set throughout them, so it's not like something you're really spending a lot of time, pathing your own way through the area, but you can kind of go off roads and look around for these flags. There's giant arrows, so you just kind of follow it. And so you kind of go around an open environment and check in on these flags. So I thought that was kind of interesting, that you had kind of this open space that you're kind of driving around in, but wasn't necessarily like a locked track or anything like that. So one thing that I was kind of surprised by, this is a monster truck game, so there's not a lot of, personality you can have in terms of the trucks themselves. Well, maybe that's a lie. I'm not a monster truck fan, but I feel like people attach to different types of monster trucks and things like that, right? But this game actually has a defined cast of characters, and I don't remember if Destruction Derby had this or not, but you can kind of go through the character select and see all these characters. They're very 90s characters, but I thought they were entertaining, and I've already closed the game at this point, but in the manual there's like stories about each of them that I thought were kind of fun, very short stories, like a paragraph, and so it was fun to kind of read the little goofy backstories behind the characters. It's kind of a shame that didn't manifest so much in the game itself, at least as far as I could tell from what limited time I played it. But it was enjoyable and fun overall, and I think I really could probably spend more time with this game and be pretty satisfied. The one thing I couldn't figure out was there are some special missions at the end of the race circuits that basically are like the actual monster truck kind of thing, where you're like driving over cars and stuff. One, it did not feel particularly great. Two, it's like in a very small arena, and it makes it really hard to navigate. And then three, I really couldn't figure out how the point system worked in this game either with that part. So I think I'm really missing something there, and I did read through the manual a little bit, and at least when it came to like the destruction component of the game, I didn't really seem like there's a lot of advice in here of how the destruction component worked. I haven't looked to see if there's any information about the that section where you're driving around the arena getting points on that, but I haven't really been able to figure out how to maximize points in that area, or really fully understand what gives you points, other than it seems like driving over cars obviously gives you some points, but not a lot. So anyways, that was the first game that Zero sent me. Now, the second game, it was completely new in packaging. I have unfortunately opened it, but this was a copy of Rayman from Costco. I believe it was like $13.99 was the price. I unfortunately have thrown away the the plastic covering since, but it's a greatest hit edition. I think this game is not super expensive, but it is definitely more valuable than I think the $13.99 of which it was originally purchased for. Although let's consider inflation. I don't know why I'm getting into price so much here. But yeah, so it's like in great condition, and so it's like really clean. And I think the thing that in opening this I remembered is I have never really liked Rayman that much. I played the PC version when I was younger, and even then I found it to be a pretty boring game. I don't know what it is, if it's the pacing or something to do with, how Rayman attacks isn't particularly interesting to me. He has like that throwing punch, which you think it would be, that punch is a very unique punch, at least in terms of a lot of platformers. But it just never really melded with me. Now, I never have gotten very far in the game, and even this time I only got to like the first few levels, and then I kind of couldn't put it up with it anymore after that. But I should probably someday try to play through this. I have played through Rayman Origins on the PlayStation 3, I believe. I think that's what it was called, right? It was that first like reboot of the Rayman franchise, not the one that ended up exclusive on Wii U and had that whole set of drama behind it. And yeah, I did enjoy that game actually. I didn't love it, I didn't hate it, but I enjoyed it. And I feel like for some reason, normal Rayman is just not really for me. But I tried it again. I kind of felt the same way, but I haven't really committed any real time into it. So maybe someday we'll actually dive deep into Rayman. I can figure out my feelings about the game. Sometimes if I don't like a game up front, that doesn't mean I won't like it, overall. Resident Evil 7, great example. And then the final game is disc only. It's actually kind of upside down in this case, but we'll deal with it. And it is Beyblade for the PlayStation 1. I don't know if this is the original Beyblade game, but it is only called Beyblade. And whew, this is a very bare bones game. You can kind of, there's some personality with there being characters from, I assume, the show. I've never watched Beyblades or watched very little of it at the very least. You can see my reflection in the plastic. And yeah, it's just, you kind of do this thing where there's like a meter. It's kind of like golf-like, where there's a meter that fills up all the way. You don't want to go too far over, or else your shot will be a bust. But once the meter fills up as much as you can, you kind of play chicken with the end, press X, and then it launches your Beyblade, and that gives you like a speed stat basically, and I think that determines basically how effective your blade is in combat. Now there are ways to defeat an enemy if you have a slower speed stat, as far as I can tell. You're in this arena with basically 3 holes on the edges, so you can kind of like bait them over to an edge, and even though you don't have the force to kind of push them off, you can kind of lead them off or get them close enough that even though you'll be pushed back further, you're in the kind of the safety position. So yeah, it was kind of interesting in that regard, but at least from what I played, there did not seem to be much more to it than that. And then you kind of have the ability to customize your Beyblade. I did not spend a lot of time on the customization of Beyblades because I did not spend a lot of time on this game. So I did not have a lot of parts, and when I tried to switch between parts, the game seemed to imply that very specific parts work with each other. So they're like things like, you got your spinner reversed or something. I'm like, I don't know what that means. And they won't let you go back until you fix it. So I basically tried to fix it. I think I did eventually fix it and just played a couple more rounds. But yeah, it just doesn't seem like there's much going on here. It doesn't seem like there's a story mode or anything. But, if you like Beyblades, who knows? Maybe this is the one for you. I have a Bakugan game on the Wii that I've never played either that I should get around to. There's also a Bakugan on the Switch coming out in this year of 2020 for way forward. I don't know anything about Bakugan. Don't listen to me. I have a couple games here that I picked up mainly as just kind of filler for ship. Basically, I had to buy some stuff and I needed some actual stuff to kind of fill out so I get the free shipping on Amazon. So that's a good opportunity to be like, hey, I'm going to be paying $8 for shipping anyways, so let me pay an extra $2 and get a game, right? And get the free shipping. So one thing I picked up was El Shaddai for Xbox 360. And I have played El Shaddai before, but I'd never owned it. And the reason why is I picked this up on on GameFly for the PlayStation 3 at the time, and I just rented it essentially. So the PS3 version's a bit more expensive now. So the 360 version seemed to be the way to go, and I always wanted to copy this game because this is probably my second favorite game of the 360 and PS3 era. Let's sans the Wii from this list here. Just right behind Nier in this case. And this game, I can't get over just like how cool it looks. It's very abstract, but it's like abstract in the right ways. Like I think a lot about like how Killer 7 has these environments that have almost like no boundaries, but at the same time it's very clear where those boundaries are when you're moving around the world. Admittedly, Killer 7's on rails, but you have this sense of space, even though sometimes there's just like not really a lot kind of defining the world itself. But other times, in the case of El Shaddai, well, in the case of Killer 7 as well, there is a lot of visual abstractness to the world that I really like, and the story is just like, the storytelling is so interesting. It's very straightforward in a lot of ways. I don't know anything about El Shaddai and what that means in religious stuff, so I can't give you anything on that. But basically, you're like walking around with this dude, like going to get these fallen angels, and then Lucifer's there talking on the cell phone to God, telling him about your progress, being like, "Oh, I'm actually worried about this," and then like, "Oh, he don't worry about that. He's doing fine. It's gonna take a little longer than we thought, but that's okay. It's cool." It's just like this very, very manager position kind of thing. It's a very fun story, and just like the presentation is great. And I know there's definitely a feeling that this game is a little repetitive and a little dull on the gameplay side. I personally have found the game to be interesting, or when I played through it, because it has this flow to it where you kind of beat up guys, and then as you beat them up, you get this thing called Vial built into your weapon, and then after a period of time, you want to purify that weapon so it has that vial's gone, because when a weapon's purified, it does more damage to enemies. But in addition to that, you can also steal weapons from enemies, and when you steal them, it also purifies them, and it gives you a vulnerability while you're purifying, versus if you just do it normally, you're vulnerable at that time. So there is this real flow to like going through combat, identifying who you want to remove weapons from as you steal weapons from them, and what weapons you want to use to take on certain enemies. So that you kind of figure out a order of what you want to approach enemies in this game, and kind of execute on that. Now, am I going to sit there and say this is like a crazy game in terms of combat? Not really. It's basically just spam the X button in the 360, but in the case of PlayStation, like spam the square button. And then sometimes you can interrupt it with a triangle button input, and that will give you like a different combo. So overall, it's a very simple combat system, and it is like an 8-hour game, and I feel like it kind of shows all of its hand when it comes to combat pretty early on. They do introduce new weapons as you go through, but not a ton of them. But I think I find that flow very satisfying, and all the bosses are very fun too. So I would definitely encourage you to check this game out if you haven't. The 360 version seems to be quite a bit cheaper. I can't quite remember how much it costs or how much the PS3 version cost, but I highly recommend El Shaddai, and I'm happy to have it back in my collection. I sat down to play this one for like an hour and ended up playing it for like an hour and 45 minutes instead. So the other game I picked up was Evergrace for the PlayStation 2. Again, another one where it's like I need something to fill out free shipping. This was with the manual and everything, which is kind of neat. Although the case is kind of dirty, and then B, the art inside's a little warped. For some reason, this game seemed to have keep coming up on my timeline. Part of it was because of Elena, who did the Lost Kingdoms 2 podcast with us, and then I had a few other people mention Evergrace to me this year, and I was like, maybe it's a sign. Maybe it's time to pick up Evergrace. So yeah, I remember seeing this game a lot when I was growing up, and I always considered picking it up. I think it's probably good I waited. The reason being is that this game seems pretty obtuse in some ways from what I played. It's got that like very secretive mana kind of melee system where you have like this bar that kind of fills up, and then when you melee, it kind of drains that bar, but it refills pretty quickly. Not so much as I think secretive mana, you like burn your entire bar if you use an attack, but But in the case of this game, it seems to really pace out, you know, how you attack enemies. And it's very chunky, and the character models look very chunky. I will excuse some of the footage here, just so you know, my Frame Meister did not play nice with this game for some reason. I'm not quite sure why, and so some of the elements of the game were very shaky. So I need to figure out what's going on with that. But it seems like a very interesting game. You can kind of switch between two characters, and there is some, I believe there's some voice acting if I recall correctly. And I think it's pretty much, you know, 2000s era PlayStation 2 voice acting, if I recall. But yeah, I didn't get very far, and then I switched over to, I think her name's Charlene or something like that, Charlene, and immediately walked off an edge on accident. So I didn't save. So it was like, go back to your save file. Oh, you have no save file. So I kind of dropped this one after about 40 minutes or so. But I am curious to maybe check this one out a bit further. It does seem kind of interesting. I was while I was looking at this game, one thing I was also thinking about was Enchanted Arms for the PS3 and 360. And, you know, this is a From Software game, and Enchanted Arms as well. And when I looked up Enchanted Arms stuff, someone had a thumbnail of a Dark Souls character on a thumbnail that said, "The Dark Souls RPG?" question mark. And I'm like, Enchanted Arms has nothing to do with Dark Souls. What are you talking about? Please, we don't have to mention Dark Souls every time From Software comes up. Evergrace is the Dark Souls of the PS2. Yeah, I don't know. And then kind of one game that doesn't really fit into this whole thing is I picked up Lost Planet 2, and unfortunately the case is a little broken, as you can see. Didn't quite make it. Well, I don't know if this is a shipping issue because I did not find the plastic in the actual box or the envelope this came in, so this may have already been broken. But yeah, my friends were interested in playing Lost Planet 2. I've always had an interest in Lost Planet 2. It seemed very Monster Hunter-ish, like a third-person Monster Hunter style game, which I thought was always kind of interesting from what I saw back in the day. I think it was like 2010-ish was when this game came out. I thought this was a full-color manual for a second, but nope, it's black and white. But yeah, it's a very strange game. It's kind of obtuse in its controls in a very Japanese way. You kind of have like these shoulder button inputs you can do where you can turn your camera at 90 degrees, and then the actual aiming and stuff is a little less sensitive. The auto aim is actually on by default, so like automatically target things, and I kind of wonder if that was the way the game was intended to be played, because that is the way it's defaulted on. But the group I was playing with, they turned it all off, so I went ahead and turned it off to join in on being a sheep, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, so I didn't love Lost Planet 2, but I had a lot of fun with it. It is very, you know, very strange in how it controls. It's like, if you look at games like Resident Evil 6 and Monster Hunter to some degree, there is this like very clunky feeling to the controls, but at the same time they give you options with like a grapple hook and things like that make it feel a little more interesting in terms of the maneuverability you have, like that quick turning and stuff like that. That's a pretty cool feature that I didn't use a ton, but I think could be pretty valuable, especially if you're doing the auto targeting, honestly. But it just plays a little bit off, you know. It doesn't feel quite right. Admittedly, I haven't played like Gears of War, which was a big third-person shooter from this time, but it is a really good-looking game, and it has some interesting mechanics where you have like this energy that's kind of can be used to heal yourself, and then also can be used to pilot mechs and use certain weapon types and things like that. And there seems to be a pretty wide variety of weapons, though you're kind of limited on what you can interact with, because the only weapons that drop are ones that you've kind of assigned to your loadout. So, like, if you have a short-range gun that's a revolver, the only short-range gun you'll find are revolvers. Even though if another person in your party has a shotgun, they'll see your revolvers that drop as shotguns. So it's kind of interesting that you kind of build this, like, loadout, and that determines what drops on the map while you're playing through in a very traditional third-person shooter style. But yeah, it's just kind of a little weird. It seems like they changed the drop system at some point, because basically you would collect these boxes, and I think those boxes were initially loot, but now they're just credits, so you just kind of get money, and then you kind of go to a slot machine and turn them in. I didn't really find that to be super satisfying. I don't think I like slot machines in any game, honestly. I'd rather get like a drop from an actual monster. I'd imagine the reason they did that is because it was, you know, easier on the player base to do that. But, you know, yeah, I don't know. But either way, it was fine. So you do get to customize your loadout a bit. We didn't spend a lot of time on the end game part of this game. I get the feeling you could spend a lot of time in Lost Planet 2 if you wanted to. And there's also seemed to be some multi-path levels where you can kind of go to different exits and follow different story paths. But they all seem to be linear in terms of like, you know, I don't think you're going to go to a different mission if you go down like an optional path. You'll just kind of finish the mission in a different way. So it does seem like there's replayability there, and I honestly wouldn't mind playing it some more. But the group I'm playing with didn't really seem super interested in going too much further in the title. So it was fun though. I enjoyed it. That one I played all the way through. That's not just an hour on that one. And this last one I actually picked up from Walmart because it was finally on sale. I've been staring at this game for about a year at my local Walmart. That's Yokai Watch 2, Fleshy Souls. I don't think this is the version of Yokai Watch 2 you typically would want. I think there's one that's like Phantom something that's like, it's like Pokemon where they do Fleshy Souls and like, I think Bony Spirits is what it's called. And then they had like a third release that kind of compiles them together into one release as far as I understand. So this probably isn't the one you want to pick up, but I had been watching this one because it was like $25 on their shelf for a long time. They finally dropped it down to, I think, like $13, and I was like, okay, it's not that much cheaper than what you could get it online, but me and this game had a relationship that we saw each other through a glass wall at Walmart for a long time. If you can see in the inside, we have a like little Yokai Watch puck in here because I got it new. I don't know what these are. I forget what they're even called, honestly. But yeah, they're in there. Oh yeah, Yokai Watch Metal. That's what they're called. Exclusive metal. And so yeah, there's the actual characters there. It did not give us any like cool art on the inside or anything like that. But yeah, I didn't spend a ton of time on this game. I still haven't played Yokai Watch 1. I picked up or rather, Anthony got me Yokai Watch 3, and my friend Anthony, and I have not played that yet either. So in getting this is probably irresponsible because I will not play this anytime soon, probably. But yeah, I did play the demo for the original game, and this game seems very similar in that regard. You kind of go around a town. Very great. It's a great looking 3DS game, especially from a time when Pokemon on 3DS did not look particularly great. At least around the time Yokai Watch 1 was coming out, XY and XX were coming out. Is that what that's called? I think I'm thinking of Feel the Magic XYXX. I think it's just called Pokemon XY or X and Pokemon Y. But yeah, that game kind of looks a little chunky, where Yokai Watch has a really nice look to it. In this one, you can play as the girl, it seems like. I don't think that was possible in the first game, which is kind of interesting because there are story connections to the original game in here. So when there are flashbacks to the original game, it actually features the girl as the protagonist rather than the guy. I don't know if they have a name actually, but yeah, it seems like a great looking game. There's like a bug catching mini game in this one. I don't know if this is in the original one. I did not love the bug catching thing. It was kind of like you had to like time a button press, and I couldn't tell if it was like slot machine like where it was like you press the A button and it's just gonna land wherever it's gonna land. Or if it was like you actually timing the button had an impact on what part of the dial it would land on, because it takes a while to actually slow down and stop after you press a button. So yeah, but it's got a great look. The battle system, I didn't really spend a lot of time in the battle system to figure out what's going on. I think the original game, there was kind of like this dial you could spin around, and it seemed like that was still here, but I didn't interact with that really at all. So I'm not sure how much changed between Yokai Watch 1 and Yokai Watch 2 mechanically. Now, my plans for Yokai Watch have been kind of on hold for a very long time. There's a couple of reasons. One is I ultimately am interested in Yokai Watch 4, and Yokai Watch 4 seems to be kind of dead in the water right now. They announced it for localization, but it more or less has not really had any updates for a while. And there's also a re-release of Yokai Watch 4 in Japan called Yokai Watch Plus, I think. And that has, I think, since come out and gone, and we still haven't heard any updates in America yet. So I'm curious if they're either, moving resources over to that Plus version of the game, or if we're just not getting Yokai Watch 4 anymore. So yeah. And then there's also a Switch re-release of Yokai Watch 1, which I don't think that got localized either. So I'm not super hopeful, to be honest, that the Yokai Watch series will continue, but I'm still interested in checking these games out. When will I check them out? I don't know. I've been saying it I would since I did the original Spectrobes video. And yeah, that was like 2013. No, that wasn't 2013. That was like 2015, I think. A couple of more maintenance kind of things. These are not particularly game specifically. I had a couple of issues recently that I needed to kind of try to resolve. One of them I have not resolved quite yet. One is something called the 1-Up card. Whoops, I lost my camera there for a second. I was holding my cartridge in front of the microphone, like hear this cartridge. So this looks like a Nintendo 64 cart, as you can see, and as you can tell, it says N64 console cleaner. And so it basically will just like slide this thing. You can see how dirty that got when I cleaned out my 64. It's like this, it starts out as like just purple. But you can kind of stick it in your 64 and kind of pull it out. I think it says don't use any kind of like rubbing alcohol solution or anything like this. So you just do it dry essentially. I'm not sure how many times you can use this, if it's a one-time thing, but these are not particularly cheap. The reason why I got this thing rather than just using like alcohol or whatever is because I consistently still have problems with my 64 freezing. I don't think it's game specific. And so I figured I should try something that maybe was more particularly geared towards cleaning out the 64. If my personal efforts haven't worked out great, you might be like, whoa, that's a waste of money. Well, I don't know. I figured I'd try at the very least. When I bought it, it also came with these 1-Up cleaning cards, and essentially these are just Q-tips, like fancy Q-tips. I would not particularly recommend these. Essentially what you do is you put a rubbing alcohol solution they give you on this side, just as fluid there, and then you wipe the game's cartridge with that. I mean, I can kind of show you with this thing, but you kind of like stick it in there, you kind of go back and forth, then you go to the other side, kind of go back and forth. And then there's a dry side too, so you can go there and dry it that way and do that. And you're gonna get the same. I don't know if I did that on camera, sorry, but yeah, basically that. But it's just the same thing as using a Q-tip, so I wouldn't really recommend that. They give you a small, I assume rubbing alcohol solution here. It's a 99% isopropyl alcohol. So I assume, I usually don't find 99%. I usually find something a bit lower than that, but you can get like 90, 96, 97 proof, It was handy to get this though, because as I was trying to fix my 64, coronavirus stuff started happening and rubbing alcohol got harder to get. I haven't looked to see if rubbing alcohol is more readily available now. So I may be able to get like a decent supply of this stuff. This is like a baby bottle, so it's not really gonna last me very long, but it'll probably work for as many as these cards will last you for. So yeah, I don't know, this definitely was handy. This one right here, the console cleaner or whatever, because it is a little hard to get into those contacts on the console itself, and you can see it clearly did something there. But unfortunately that did not fix my console freezing woes, so still looking into what that situation entails and how we fix that, so we can finally stream some Quest 64. So the other thing I want to talk a little bit about is this guy. This guy is not new. This is something I've had for a while now. If you've seen this before, you might be able to guess what this is. This is a HDMI adapter for the Nintendo GameCube. So there's an HDMI port right there. I know that focus is going to be great. And then this plugs into the digital out port of the GameCubes that support that digital out. And unfortunately, this thing seemed to just kind of stop working. And I think it has something to do with this connector here. I think this connector, unfortunately, did not stay seated properly, so it did last me a couple years. Now this is just something somebody 3D printed. This was very early in the GameCube HDMI adapter scene. This was before you had those Eon ones or the Carby ones. So this is just something some dude made. And, sometimes with these kind of things, somebody makes them and then they never really come again. So I jumped on this and picked it up. This is one of the models that was changed to kind of help prevent, possibly shaking loose from the console. If you didn't hear the story, I think it was Metal Jesus Rocks or something like that, had his GameCube die because the connector became loose and it supposedly killed his GameCube. So this was the adjustment one. But yeah, after about a couple of years, this thing has stopped working on me. So I don't know what there could be done to fix it. You can kind of open it up a little bit here and you can kind of see inside the components. But I'm not technical, and it's covered in like this yellow, like tape kind of thing with some like hot glue in there. So yeah, I'm guessing I'm not going to be able to do anything with this. So I'm holding on to it now, but I don't know why. It's still here. Anyways, that's a long way of saying that I needed another solution. So I went ahead and went with, so Eon, if you saw the Eon adapters, Eon seems to be not creating those HDMI adapters anymore. Carby does seem to be, but when I was on their website, I noticed that, and Carby, I guess Insurrection Industries might be another name for them. So maybe the Insurrection Industries is the company who makes it, and then Carby is the cable type. But there's an HDMI adapter, but I was like, hey, there's component cables too. And for me, with my FrameMeister setup, component cables are honestly easier to work with. So I went ahead and just went to the component cable thing. And I will tell you, I was very impressed with how these things are packaged in here. Now, this was already opened up, but like, this is not like a cheap bag or anything. I mean, it's not expensive, but you know, this is a nice bag. It feels really nice too. And the cables came in here, and there's also like BNC adapters in here too. So it was like a really nice packaging. I have not put anything back in there, so that's just an empty box. But as you can see here, essentially we have the cables themselves, and it's got like, you know, this big old chunky boy there. And then also we have the component cable connectors here. Now these are technically BNC, I believe. So you know, let me see if I can get it off there. Yeah, so you can see this is not your typical component connection there that you would have. This is more for like PVMs and things like that. So this is like an adapter that comes with it, just a little cheap thing you can just kind of stick in there and twist on, and then it basically makes it component cables. Oops, I'm holding it. I keep like wanting to hold things to the microphone for some reason. So yeah, and you know, you still have to do audio through your typical GameCube analog out port. But this seems pretty good. I have not spent a lot of time with this. But the nice thing about this is that I was actually able to do the kind of like NES games on GameCube in 240p, so that looks better now. I don't really notice the difference between, you know, using HDMI for the 480p stuff so far, but I have not spent a lot of time with these. I think we will eventually put a good chunk of time into using these. But yeah, I just had a little trouble with you know, getting that other adapter working. You might be saying, why don't you just use a Wii? And you know, I did recently buy a new Wii because mine was not working properly. But this is great for Game Boy Advance support if you're using the Game Boy Player and the what's it called, GBI, which is the Game Boy Player software, homebrew software. So yeah, it was handy, and so far I've been happy with it despite not really using it a lot. So the last couple of things are not particularly video games, but they are video game related. So the first one here, and I talked about this one a while ago, is Debutante Detective Corps. If you didn't see, I streamed the game that was related to this called Ojo-sama Sasomu. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but that is a thing. And so this was an OVA that came out, I think around the same time. I believe if this did not come out first, I think they were in production around the same time, because scenes from the OVA actually appear in the opening video for the PCFX game. But yeah, this is based off that PCFX game I played, and it's a pretty cool OVA. It's very short, but I think it's very aware of its time. There's a lot going on here, but it does a good job of like playing with the plot points of the story and kind of moving things forward pretty quickly. The girls are very it's essentially like these 5 very rich girls who are also like crime fighters, I guess you could say, and they're in this school, and there's like this threat to the school. I can't remember if they set up the threat for something else. No, it's somebody else. I won't get into it. It's a complicated story for a 25-minute OVA essentially, but it has a lot of fun, and I think it's very aware of its length, and so it spends a lot of time having fun with how it resolves situations. Sometimes situations are resolved pretty quickly, but it's like it doesn't really care that they're resolved. Like, it doesn't put too much stock in it. It usually has like a very humorous ending to some things. One of the funny things is like this girl here on the center box here, she has like a fighting scene where she fights this dude, and for some reason the guy just keeps getting bigger and bigger in the fighting scene throughout the whole thing. For no real particular reason, he just grows. It's a strange thing. But yeah, it's good fun, and you know, it was about $25 for it, so maybe a little expensive, but I'm glad I picked it up. I think I will be uploading this onto archive.org. I get the feeling this thing is not in circulation in any way anymore, and I think it's good for you all to see if you want to. So I would recommend. I think it's on YouTube as well, so it is out there if you want to check it out. The dub is pretty good too. I'd recommend the dub. So yeah, check that out. And then finally, I went ahead and picked up the Love and Berry OVA as well. This is already on archive.org, and the Love and Berry Discord group also went out of their way to go ahead and do a fan translation of the anime itself. So yeah, it's a pretty, like, I don't know nearly enough about Love and Berry, and look, there's a cute little charm here, like a little bracelet. I've not taken that out yet. I'm very tempted to, but I have the feeling this is going to fit on a 6-year-old's wrist, maybe not a 30-year-old man's wrist. But yeah, it's super pink in here, as you can see. I think there's actually some like, some art there. I don't know if this is supposed to be like, hey, color this in, or it's just like, okay, well, we only have the ability to print pink, so we're gonna make an outline of Love and Berry. But yeah, it's a fun little animated OVA about Love and Berry trying to get into this magic academy, and them trying to help out this girl who I haven't watched the entire fan translation yet to know the exact motivation behind it, but they basically have to make a human happy to get into this academy. They're fashion magic witches or whatever. I don't know if they're technically humans or if they become not humans when they become, part of the fashion magic academy. But yeah, it was pretty fun and I enjoyed it. And there's some like CG scenes where they do the actual dancing and things like that. So that's a little sad because I think I personally prefer the animated look versus the weird like Naomi Dreamcast hardware models that there are for Love and Berry. But yeah, it was good fun. So I had a fun time watching it. Should you particularly go out and get yourself a copy of this? I don't know. I'm not sure how many people actually care about Love and Berry, but I would really like to spend some more time with the series. After playing a Tokadol and having those Aikatsu games, this is kind of up my alley. And I don't know if I want to go the route of like buying a bunch of cards for the DS game that's in Japanese, or doing like the hardware emulation, because this is originally like an arcade game. So yeah, I don't know. Love and Berry. Pretty all right. And then finally, also only somewhat related, but I thought it was worth bringing up. And I will say this in bringing this up. I somewhat know the author to this series. You probably already know what I'm talking about if you're aware of me. But yeah, this is Scum of the Brave. Whoop, right there. And Scum of the Brave is technically a video game. There's like a Nico RPG Maker visual novel kind of game out there that you can play through. It's pretty short. I think it's just the first act of the story, and I don't think they made any of the other acts in video game form, unfortunately. But they did go ahead and put out a manga version. I'm not sure which one came first. But it's good fun. I like the aesthetic a lot. I like how the main character looks. I like how colorful it is. So the other one I have over here, I actually have the original one that I imported a while ago. I like the character design a lot in general for this. And in general, the thought behind the Scum of the Brave, from what the author told me, is that these characters are not particularly good guys, but they do good things in the world. So yeah, and I have a little business card here for her too. I won't flash the other side because it has contact info on there. I'm sure it's fine, but I'm not gonna do too much. But yeah, Scum of the Brave. It's just got a nice look to it. I like the character design a lot in this, and unfortunately, the second volume is only in Japanese at this point. Although it does have, and you probably can't see this, it does have like I think it's called furigana or something like that above all the kanji. So if you were trying to learn some Japanese, that might help you out there a little bit. But only the first manga, let me grab that. Only the first manga has been translated to English, and there's no physical version as far as I can tell. It just has not been popular enough. So I will say this, Scum of the Brave, if you're interested, it's like it's got a nice mix of action, humor, and very likable characters who are also very scummy, as the title says. So if you haven't checked it out, I would recommend reading the manga. It's available free online for the first volume. But I will say that I am probably somewhat biased. I've had multiple interactions with them on the internet before, and also had the chance to meet them while I was in Japan. So, I think this is true for anybody. They'll always be like, oh, well, but I just like it because I like it. But I think it's worth noting that all those things, because that definitely can color the view of somebody has of something. But I do really like Scum of the Brave. You might not be able to get the physical anymore. I'm not sure if this is still being sold or not. But yeah. Anyways, that was a lot of stuff. It's been, I know I had some test recording before this, but it's been almost an hour as far as I can tell. So that's going to do it for this week, or this pickups video. Thank you for coming. Maybe I'll try to do one of these more often, so we don't have like a 45-minute long video again. Do something shorter, maybe closer to like 10 to 15 minutes or something. We'll see. But anyways, thank you again for coming. OneControllerBoard.com is the website. If you've been around recently, you'll know that I went ahead and did an update to the Chibi Robo video that talks about, the current status of the Chibi Robo developer Skip. So if you go see that, that's like a short update video. I also recently did a stream where I talked about some of the PS1 or PS2 and PSP imports I had, or rather I played them on stream. So that might be worth checking out too. And if you are interested in import games, I also did a podcast recently about the NEC PCFX, and we didn't have any PCFX titles here today, but I'd recommend going and listening to that. That's a really good podcast. I was on there with Playongo, who's also known as Filler Online, so I'd recommend going to listen to that. So yeah, I kind of have a lot of places to point you today, I feel like, actually, which sometimes in these videos, I'm like, I don't know, go look at the last thing I did, and then maybe the last thing before that, but I think these are somewhat relevant today, at the very least, so please go do that. Otherwise, though, thank you so much for coming. Again, OneControllerBoard.com is the website, and I hope you have a great week. Bye. I'll wave this way. Bye.